Okay, my eaglets, we're going to continue with the writing process today. Specifically, we're going to talk about the body paragraphs because we are done with ABCs. The last video left off saying that, okay? So what we're going to do today is we're going to pee all over it. I gave you a little preview in the last video, okay? And so let's begin so we can pee on it. For this video, I will be turning off the lights because it's more effective to see the screen. I want to make apologies about that from the previous videos, but this is my first rodeo with doing this, okay? So the lights will be going off and coming on whenever I think that it will benefit you all to have to view this. All right, so let's begin. As I just said, after the intro, it's time for elaboration. So we're going to pee everywhere. Specifically, in the paragraph, this is of course an acronym, and the acronym stands for P on. Now notice right here, of course the first P is the point, and in our school, as I was saying in the other video, we color code the information so you can see that explanations are in red. Examples are underlined in green, and then our exit closing sentence will be in blue. Okay, so let's talk about what do we mean when we say explain. A lot of times teachers make the mistake of thinking that students actually know what these terms are. I gave my students a list of the most used verbs on standardized testing with the definition, so you may want to supply your students with that information because it can help them a whole lot in order to learn academic wording on testing. Okay, and I do let them use it during tests so that they can have it as a reference so they can start getting it into their personal lexicon. Okay, so personal definition, that's what I tell my students explanations are. It's the easy way for them to understand what does it mean to actually explain something, to provide details about something, to be specific in your meaning about something. And then the next one would be an example. For our text, we are, once again, like I said, we're doing no text this time because structure is of the essence, okay? But we are going to move on to text for the next essay. But for this one, we're doing personal story. So a personal story would be an illustration. And if you had text, that's what you're using the text for, to illustrate your explanation about your point. And then finally, you're going to show how your example proves your point, okay? You can't just tell a story or drop a quote or some text information and not draw the lines to how it is relevant. Relevant means how is it important? What is it to the reader, okay? And then we're going to, of course, exit our paragraph. Now, in the past, you've heard terms like bow tie sentence and clincher, okay? For our P, so for you to remember the last part, we're going to call it an exit statement. So we can exit out of the paragraph so we can move on to our next point, our next body paragraph. Okay? Now, points equal topic sentences. So you need to make sure that the child makes the connection that points actually equal topic sentences. Okay, I know I talked about this in the last video. I also want to reiterate it in this one, okay? And here was the example that I gave from the last video. Notice it says to begin right here. We do our transitions in orange, so I model it in all of my PowerPoints to get the students more acclimated to the color coding system. And as I said in the last video, you want to do this so the student can start seeing the pattern that they really did already write the topic sentence within the thesis statement. And this is what I mean. Reading is my favorite habit because it is inexpensive. I can choose the topic, and I can do it at my own pace. So literally they could pull down the sentence with one of the points, and they have a basic topic sentence. This is what I stress to my struggling writers who need that scaffolding. Of course, you're going to have some students that could go and be a little bit more creative, a little bit more varied in their sentence structure. But for students that need to have it scaffolded for the first essay or two, that's fine. Scaffolding is positive. Here's another example. Atlanta is my favorite vacation spot because I got to visit the Coca-Cola Company, tour Martin Luther King's museum, and shop at the Underground Mall. So, notice, I put this right here so that the students can give me a transition so I can make sure they know what transitions are appropriate for first paragraph topic sentence. And once again, we're bringing that structure. All we did was took this part and connected our first point about the Coca-Cola Company, so they could clearly see how they really have done the work. At this time, if you would like to pause the video so that you can do a little check to see whether your students can find the right transition that would go at the beginning of an opening body paragraph, you can pause the video. Now, some transitions we know we could say initially. We could say to begin. We can use to start off. But since this is a presentation that's more geared towards middle school and high school students, we will try to stay away from immature languages like first. Okay? We're going to let the elementary school students have that. We'll try to beef up our vocabulary by using words such as initially, to begin, or we could, if we did our points from greatest to least, we could say most importantly. Those type of transitions that help, that better improve our essays vocabulary. And here is another one. So once again, we are stressing that you are literally pulling down the thesis statement and then connecting it to the next point. And once again, you can stop the video and have your students fill in the information for the transition to see what they come up with for the second body paragraph. So at this time, you can pause the video. Now, your students probably came up with answers like to continue, furthermore, and maybe some of them did the not only but also. Not only did I get to visit the Coca-Cola Company while in Atlanta, but it's also my favorite vacation spot because I got to go to Martin Luther King's museum. Maybe they tried one of those more complex ones, which is awesome. Okay, totally awesome sauce when you try to go a little bit more. It improves your writing. Once again, we're going to try to stay away from words like second because that's a little bit too immature for your age. So you can see that those words are outlawed in my room. So for students to try to use more appropriate language. And then here is the third body paragraph example. Once again, for those students that need it, let them do it. Remember scaffolding, this is the first essay. So we're going to let them bring that sentence down and put that last point on there. And for the last time, you can pause the video and have your students attempt to put in an appropriate closing transition. So you can pause the video at this time. Now, your students probably came up with transitions like most importantly, last but not least, finally, my most important reason, moreover, equally important, to me enjoying my time in Atlanta was my trip to the Underground Mall. If they felt like the second and third point was about equal, any of those would have sufficed. Of course, we would try to stay away from third, my last, okay? We will also stay away from in conclusion, because we're not concluding until we get to the body paragraph. The concluding paragraph, rather. So, let's talk about what goes in this P. We already said the point, and we just went through the topic sentences about the points. The next E and P is the explanation that I've already talked about, but let's go a little bit more in depth. It's the most time-consuming step, the explanation and the example, because the students really have to dig deep and really have to interact with the point that they have made. So an explanation is just that. It must be followed by the example. So you need to stress explain and example. Like I tell students all the time, you do it all the time when you talk. You know how kids are. So I play with my students and I say, you know, you talk about your mom behind her back, you know, after she's fussed at you and she's walked out the room and you and your brother or sister are in there in cahoots. You say things like, oh, mama makes me so mad. She's always tripping. And your sister or your brother like, yeah, man, she gets on my nerves. And then you start going to examples. I mean, she always is telling us to clean up, and it makes me upset. That's the explanation. And then your brother or sister usually chirps in to, and then you start going into the example. I mean, just yesterday, I washed the dishes, I folded the clothes, I went outside, and I even helped mow the grass, and she's still riding my case. We do it all the time in natural conversation because it's our natural thinking pattern, okay? So, of course, it's the way we write. The reader should have a clear idea of what you mean after this step. After you have explained an example, it ought to be abundantly clear exactly what you mean about the topic, or you would need to go and revise. And remember, this is what supporting the point. Everything in the essay should support the points that you said that you were going to discuss, students. And if a sentence in there is not doing it, it must go. Rejection. Take it out. Omit it. So, the explanation is to give details, to clarify, to add meaning. That's why I tell my students it's a personal definition based off the idea of add meaning. They seem to catch it when you say, what do you mean personally when you say that? So you can think about it as, like I said, a personal definition. You're attempting to make an idea, your point from your topic sentence clear to them. When we say clear, we as writers mean beyond the shadow of a doubt, you now know what I'm talking about, what I said that in my topic sentence. And we would try to use effective transitions before our sentence. By this I mean, to explain, this means that. These transitions also help you remember what you are doing. You are defining. If you look, by this I mean, what do you mean? What's your personal definition for it? All right, so P on it. We're about to start peeing on our points to do our explanation. Okay? So we have our transition box over it. And our students here at the school received a packet with the chart in there, because the first time we don't like for them to draw it. We want them to see it, but you are welcome to just have your students draw a flow map. Our students were provided with this. Notice it's the same thing that's up there on the board. And it gives them the definition of each section. Okay? Now, if you would like me to furnish you a copy of this, once again, you can just send an email to eureka.dalton@tejischools.org, and that will be in the description box of this video. Now, so we will have our points here. So I'm going to go on and put my first point as an example. So my first point was ingenuity. I said that's one thing that a person needs in competition, okay? And then provide your own personal definition. And I'm just going to go ahead on, because I know I want to just say to begin. Keep it pretty simple. And I'm going to talk about it, ingenuity. What do I mean when I say that competition breeds ingenuity? Competition is a good idea in schools because ingenuity is the product of it. And that's what I would write right here. So at this time, you can have your student put their first point, and if they can think of a transition, they could go ahead on and put it in. If they can't, that's not a big point, because we are going to come back to that in another step. And if they want to go ahead on and fill that in because they got a good one in mind, they can. And notice, you don't have that many lines because this is a map. You're not trying to write your whole sentence and whatnot out here. Okay? So I'm just going to put okay? So that's what I mean when I say creativity. And we would do that for our second point and our third point. So at this point, you can stop the video and have your students go ahead on and continue by putting each one of their points in the boxes. So they would put their point for number 2 and their point for number 3. And then they would define what they specifically mean when they say that word or phrase. And that's where we would stop today. Okay? That's where you would stop today in your writing process. And then you would go to the next step on tomorrow. Okay? So this is where you would stop. Let students write this down and monitor to make sure they actually understand explanations. Okay? Or the alternative is you can stop after the next E that I'm about to go over the example if you monitor and walk around and you notice that your students are fairly catching on to the idea of explanations quickly. So once again, you can stop right here for today. If you pause the video and as you monitoring, you notice that students are having problems where you might need to go and either rewind this or supplement it with your own explanations, some other activities, okay? Maybe some small grouping or pairing them with their shoulder partner. Or after you pause it and you monitor for a while and walk around and your students generally have it, you can then move on to the next E that I'm about to talk about. So at this time, you can pause the video and monitor. To continue on to the next step in P, we're going to P on it still. We're going to P on it. Remember, we're P'ing on everything. We're P'ing on all our ideas. So we are going to move on to our example. And an example means to provide a story or illustration to support the explanation. If text is provided, you will place the text info, the quote. here. It is helpful to put paragraph and line numbers and the page number because your teacher might want you to do an in-text citation high school students, okay? And some middle school teachers want to start getting students acquainted with that idea. So if you are using text high school students, teachers with this, and you want them to write the paragraph, line number, or page number, that's fine. For our intensive purposes, for our first aid at the middle school, junior high level, we are just doing, like I said, an expository essay where they can use their own personal background information. So we would be doing the story or the illustration. Now, good writers know that you can literally do both. You can illustrate it and then also find text to support it, okay? And if you are dealing with high school students, an advanced writing class, go for it. So, I will still have my point. Y'all know we are looking at, I showed you the sheet. The sheet has it all connected. But of course, on a PowerPoint slide, to make it where you can see it, I couldn't squeeze all the information on. So, we're still talking about my point of ingenuity. So, I'm just going to write it right here. Y'all know on the sheet, it'll be in the boxes. Now I gotta provide an example of what I said for my explanation. I said it can help people do accomplish things, okay, that they didn't know they could do. So I want to talk about the competition that happened at my school in regards to Quiz Bowl. So I will talk about how Quiz Bowl fostered ingenuity in the sense of it made the students try to come up with valuable solutions to problems. It made them think about ways to beat other people. It made them think about how the school could be better, what type of awards or rewards to give. So that's the first thing that popped into my head. Notice I would just write Quiz Bowl right there because I know the story I want to tell. I want to stress again that you are not writing a whole sentence or sentences out. That's the thing about personal writing. You can write a couple of words and that'll remind you of the story you want to tell once you actually get to the rough draft. And we would, of course, then do the same thing. We will come over with our points, okay, and put our story that we want to tell for each one of our points. Teachers, at this time, you can stop the video to ensure that students are doing this correctly. If it's not a story, it's not an example. What do I mean? Stories have time and places. So in order to start off with something, it's going to be difficult sometimes if you don't ask questions to the students. If you're really lost teachers, as you walk around, you're probably going to see kids that have different things, and it's going to be sketchy like this, like I put Quiz Bowl. All right. And let's go back to the creative. Develop better ways of doing something. So I got Quiz Bowl, and I could put so the teachers had to try to figure out what would be the best way to teach this, or to get kids involved in Quiz Bowl, to make them want to do it, to make them want to win. And we came up with some very ingenious ways of making them want to participate, want to be accountable, want to succeed. So I'm doing this from a teacher standpoint about the Quiz Bowl that we have for science and social studies. Of course, kids are going to be writing about the sports approach. I chose this so they won't copy my answers. Y'all know that when you actually do the topic, sometimes kids copy your answer. So sometimes y'all will see me do something that I know that it wouldn't make sense for them to copy. so that we can hear what they have to say, because we want to hear what the students have to say, not our own thoughts. So like I said, at this point, we would walk around, and if you are confused, like sometimes I am about what a child has on his paper, what I will do is just ask them simply, hey, what type of story this is going to end up being? And they usually spit it right out because they know exactly what they are talking about. And if you are not hearing words like, oh, I'm talking about the barbecue that we did last year for our family reunion, and how we made it out of a competition and everybody got excited about it. How many shirts or snowballs could we make, and then you could just come out and say okay and move on. So students, those are the type of responses that your teacher wants to hear if they ask you a question. You ought to be able to tell them the story that you have in mind, because we're doing background information, so we are going to have to do a story illustration because you have no text. So at this point, you can monitor teachers and you can stop for today. And I'm going to come with the next installment where we talk about how to exemplify our example to show the connection to our explanation. All right? Okay, so we're coming together for the next part of P, all right, which is to exemplify. Okay, so we're left off with the example where we told the story or gave the illustration of what we were talking about in regards to our example. My explanation was based off of what I said in my introduction about ingenuity, okay? So then I had to explain what ingenuity meant to me. And then I had to provide an example, an illustration, a story to support what I said in my explanation. Now you have to exemplify. How does the example show how the explanation is accurate, plausible, or logical? And I can't be redundant. Redundant is a bad word in writing. We don't want to say the same thing over and over. We might want to reiterate something. We might want to add emphasis to something, a statement, an idea, a situation. But we do not want to be redundant. We don't want to be going around in a circle looking like a crazy person, okay? Or sounding like one. So not to be redundant, but we do want to make a connection. So how is the example showing, supporting what I said in my explanation? So I gave an example about Quiz Bowl at the school and how it fostered ingenuity because it made teachers have to try to figure out, fun ways to get the kids pepped up about it, because it's a competition. So you want to win, all right? So the teachers were already psyched about wanting to win, so we could have that S on our chest. We could be the queen of the day. So we needed to get the kids on board. So we actually had to sit there and, like anybody that wants to win, anybody that wants to compete and win, we have to think about ways to get the kids all board, focused, and as hungry as us for the win. So I gave that as the Quiz Bowl as my example. So now I have to write what I just said down, because that's the exemplar. That exemplifies my example. So that's what I will write here. All right. And I will write it there. It doesn't want to cooperate, but I'll write it there. So it shows how new creative ideas came about due to competition. So that's how I would tie all of that together. That's how does it exemplify? How does my story about Quiz Bowl exemplify that ingenuity is fostered by competition? That's it. That's what I would say. Okay. So once again, like we have been doing, and of course I wanted to do this in red, but it wasn't cooperating, so I had to do it in blue. I wanted to do it in red because that's the true color coding for that particular for this particular section. But no worries. You would stop the video at this point, just like we have done in the past, and allow the students to do it for their other points. Okay. So I would do it for Bill's character and social skills. I would keep moving on down through the row. So I will look at my example to exemplify it. You have to look at the example to exemplify it, just like you had to look at the explanation to write the example. It all goes together. I hope students, you are realizing that all of this is connected. Writing is very structured. It's not magic. It's structured. And once you learn the structure, you can write. You are a writer. You just have to learn the structure. Now at this point, teachers, you can stop the video and allow the students to write their statements that exemplify their examples. We're finally there. Drum roll, please. We are ready to exit our paragraphs. But we can't. You cannot exit a paragraph, meaning you can't map it, okay? You cannot map it. You have to do this in the rough draft. So, as far as your mapping for your body paragraphs, you have accomplished the task. Play the rocking music in your head. Okay. So once again, the last E cannot be done till you actually write the rough draft. This is all of the mapping phase. This is all of the second step of writing. We did brainstorming, that's the first one, and mapping is the second one. So you are done with your body paragraph mapping. And here is the rationale for why you can't. You have to write the paragraphs out. An exiting sentence is a closing sentence. And closing sentences are summaries. And you can't have a summary until you actually written a paragraph, because then you have to read it so you can summarize what you said. So this will be once you write the rough draft. So we're going to move on, and we're going to catch that last E when we finally get to the rough draft stage. But we're not quite there, because we have to do our close the paragraph mapping. Now teachers, you might elect not to do this step, but I do this step because it really helps struggling students. Okay, it really helps struggling students keep up. I have them take out 3 sheets of loose leaf paper, and I have them go in on and write the topic sentences that we discussed in a previous video. I have them write that, or it might be this video. I made so many videos. My bad. Have them write each one of their topic sentences on a separate sheet of paper. I do this so that students can realize that each one of those boxes becomes a paragraph. They need to start making connections between that, and some of them don't. So I have them write each one of their topic sentences on a separate sheet of paper. Okay? And then when they get ready to rough draft their explanation and example, they put it on that sheet of loose leaf along with the exemplification of the example, and then they will write their closing sentence. So you might decide to do this scaffolding activity that I do It's totally up to you, but I did want to throw that out there so that for you that have struggling writers that may be doing some type of intervention or remedial course, I would definitely suggest that you do this activity. I found it to be greatly greatly helpful to students. And then I'm just showing you the sentence pattern, because then this is what I'm talking about the E right here. Once they write this out like this in this perfect little thing, then they're going to be able to write the exit in this sentence. But they can only do that once they've written all of it. And I know you should have at least 6 sentences. I hate to get into numbers, and some students are hooked on numbers. Some teachers are, but there really truly is no maximum number. There is a minimum number, because how can you do all this really effectively without having about 6 sentences? I don't know how that is possible. So I will say between like 5 to 6 sentences. But to say how many sentences you're supposed to have, I don't like to get into that. I will say, students, always keep in mind how much space you have. Most times standardized testing is only the front and the back of a paper. So keep that in mind. So we already talked about the explanations. Is your own personal definition, just reiterating that on another slide. And we have examples, right? Once again about it. This is if you need to go back through and talk to students about those parts. Okay? So we are getting to the transitions, and there are smooth operators. If your students skip that part a step back or two and did not put in transitions, we need to go ahead and rectify that situation by allowing them to put in transitions, okay? And the purpose of transitions are very simple. It's one of those things that is very simple, but is very necessary in writing. That's what creates fluidity. And fluidity is not a big word, students. Fluidity sounds just like it has the word fluid in it. You want your writing to be like fluid. You want it to be smooth. All right, that's why I put smooth operator. Okay, one of those old songs. You're too young to remember that song. But mind you, we want writing to be smooth. So we're going to go in and we're going to put transitions specifically at the beginning of each body paragraph. And we're going to put them right before our explanations and right before our examples. Now I want to stress, I cannot stress enough actually, that you are going to have more transitions in your writing besides that, okay? You're going to have more transitions in your writing besides that. But those are the ones that you should not miss. Those are the ones that you should not miss. So let's go ahead on and put those in. And once you do that, you are ready for the closing. All right? And I do not want you to get this confused with the closing paragraph. With the closing statement. This is, we're about to map the closing paragraph. Okay, but now going back to transitions. Once again, you need to pause the video, teachers, and allow your students to go in and on the sides of their mapping, go ahead on and put in transitions. Now I'm going to turn the light on for a moment so that you can see the sheet that our students have. Once again, our students have this sheet right here. Right here, they can put the transitions over the points right here. And then, notice they have good space out to the sides, right here, to write explanation transitions for each one. And If you look down, they have spaces on the sides right here where they can easily go in and write transitions like, for example, to explain, most notably, those types of transitions. So they can make sure and at least have some. Okay, and it gets them used to using them and realizing that they are important parts of writing. And like I said, you notice beside each column, there's a pretty good space there. So just write those little couple of few words for transitions for your explanation and your example. And so you got to once again see the sheet here that the students have. Okay, that's how it looks in its entirety. It's not broken up like it is here, so they can see the continuation and how the points are connected. So the students will go back in. Now I give my students a transition sheet. You can of course find them online. There was one that I used from Write for the Future, and that's the one that I give my students. And it looks like so. And I really like this one because it gives them, like it says, specific example transition. It categorizes them total awesome sauce. Okay, so if you have Write for the Future, you could just go take this transitional words to phrases for coherence and unity out of it. This was on a bunch of different pages. I took and shrunk it to make it fit on one page. Save the trees. And you can do the same thing. Okay, so now that you have seen that, you can pause the video and allow students to go in and put transitions in those areas I just showed you on our sheet. If you let your students do it on loose leaf, it works the same way. They just go in and do it. Now, if they have an orange marker, they could go in and write them in orange. That's our color coding for transitions. And the reason that we color code it, because teachers, they make it so much easier when you are grading. And you can look back at the rough draft and see parts that are missing and parts that the student knew was missing through the peer editing that we do. Or if you make them peer edit on them, you make the students peer edit it themselves, you can still see what they thought was something and it's not. So it helps you get data to further your instruction in the different areas that they obviously have issues with. All right, so now let's close the case. It's time for the closing paragraph. The goodbye. Oh, goodbyes are always so sad. So, the closing paragraph is basically, we're going to paraphrase. That's a big word. Paraphrase. We're going to paraphrase the information in our essay. Specifically, we're going to paraphrase the main idea, our C, our composition topic, right? So we're going to, our composition topic, because that's what students, y'all remember, right? That's the C in ABCs. Excuse me. It's also known as our thesis. Our money word. We need to paraphrase that, okay? We have to paraphrase that. Paraphrase means that we are not going to use the same words. No. And we're not just going to move them around like they're Legos a little bit and say that it's paraphrased. When you think about paraphrasing, you need to think about Transformers. That's what I tell my students. Bumblebee, no, when he's in his car form, he looks very different from when he's in his robotic form. That's the way you should do your main idea, your composition topic, your thesis, and the points. Notice number 2 has that word again, paraphrase. That's what you should do for both of these items. They ought to be like Bumblebee. transformer at the end after you're done with it. Now, just some strategies you can use to transform. You can use words that are synonymous with the word that you used, okay, in the introduction. You can, if you said your points using one word, why not try now to use a sentence to describe each one of the points that you discussed or you listed in the introduction? That's a hot way to do it. Maybe you want to go back and briefly visit important ideas or information from each one of your body paragraphs. Not pulling it verbatim, meaning word for word from it, because remember, we are transforming, but revisiting it, okay, so that you could write it in a different way, okay? That's what we are trying to do. You need to definitely understand that paraphrasing means that you are transforming the information. Now, I say transform because Bumblebee is still Bumblebee when he's a car, okay? So that's what I mean by words that are synonymous. Synonymous comes from the word synonym. So you are trying to find words that are similar in meaning to what you said initially. Okay? Similar in meaning to what you said initially. Because we can't say anything new. No. We cannot say anything new in our closing because a closing is a summary. And we know summary means that we've already said it, or we reading something, we've already read it. Now we just telling you what we said or what we've read, okay? And once you do these two things, then you can do your closing statement. I think about the closing statement as being a mirror to my attention getter. So sometimes I go back and I read my attention getter because then I could kind of go back and I can look at what I wrote, and then I can flip it or I can readdress it in my closing statement. Okay? I mean, those are some tips or strategies that I use to write effective closings. Once again, and for the closing statement, for you all that may struggle with it, definitely go back and look at your attention getter and do that. Flip it. Address it again. If you asked a provocative question, now you could kind of give the answer to that provocative question. If you started off with a story, you could go back and revisit that story and then go ahead on and conclude it. If you started off with a mystery, now you could give them the answer to it. Okay? If you started off with a statistic, maybe now you could come in and discuss that statistic and talk about the impact of it. Whatever the case may be, going back and looking at your attention getter is a great way to generate ideas for your closing statement. All right, and notice I say statement because it can be more than one sentence, okay? 1 to 3 sentences. Now, when you start getting longer than that, I don't know how that was a closing statement because it's starting to get longer than the entire closing. So at this time, we're going to get in there and we're going to try to write a closing paragraph. So let's go ahead on and do that. Teachers, at this time, you can pause the video and walk around and monitor your students' progress.